Well, thank you. Good morning, church. I'd like to ask you something right away. When was the last time it was truly quiet in your life? And I don't mean quiet around you. Here in Arborg, you live in quite a quiet place. But I mean quiet inside you. Probably most of us can't remember, because we wake up and within seconds the noise begins. Maybe it's the phone, maybe it's a text message, maybe it's the ache in your joints reminding you you're not 30 anymore. There are a lot of worries we went to bed with, like a grandchild's choices, a health report you are waiting on, a decision you've been struggling with, and all this creates some kind of a noise that lives in our heads, somewhere between our ears. And not only that, today both Christians and non-Christians live under the weight of fear. We just talked with some of you before the service about it. Our culture runs on anxiety. Many people feel restless and dissatisfied. Worry has almost become a habit. Turn on the news and it tells you what to fear. Talk to others and you hear new reasons to be anxious. Fear is not only common, it is also profitable, because there are whole industries that grow by keeping people afraid. And think about last week. How often did you feel worried or discontent? Is there a situation in your life today that you wish you could change so that you could finally have peace? And you know, the truth is that all these noises and worries are not a new problem. They are not caused by smartphones, news outlets, or rising prices. This is an ancient human problem. But in the Bible, this problem has an answer. 3,000 years ago, a shepherd who later became king and who carried more pressure on his shoulders than most of us can imagine, wrote down that answer in exactly 3 verses. And we have just read these 3 verses. Just 3 verses, that's it. And Charles Spurgeon, the great London preacher, once said that Psalm 131 is one of the shortest psalms to read, but one of the longest to learn. It's a lifetime of wisdom packed into these 3 sentences. And today we're going to unpack simple 3-word pattern to do it. Retreat, renew, and recommit. 1 word for each verse. So let's get started. Let's look at verse 1 again. My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. Notice again who wrote this. It's King David, the most powerful man in Israel, the man who united the nation, who commanded armies, who did a lot of construction in Jerusalem. This is a man with every reason to be proud. And what does he say? He says, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. He's choosing humility. And he's not just choosing it quietly, he's declaring it before God. And then this phrase, I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. Let's briefly focus on the words, things too wonderful for me, because they're important here. This word wonderful is particularly important. These wonderful things, these are not just difficult things. These are the things that belong to God alone. His plans, His timing, His hidden purposes, the things that only God can manage. The Bible uses this particular word when it talks about the dividing of the Red Sea, when it talks about God's miracles, when it talks about God's unfathomable knowledge. So those amazing works that only God can do. And David is saying, I am no longer trying to carry what only God can carry. Now, what does this mean? The great matters David is talking about are the things we try to control that we were never meant to control. These are things like what others think of us, whether our children or grandchildren make good choices, what the economy is going to do next year, whether we are going to be okay. David recognized that pride is a refusal to trust. Pride is always reaching, always climbing, always anxious to prove something or fix something or know something. And at some point, David made a choice. He retreated from that striving. He stopped reaching for what only God can hold. You can think of it this way. Pride is like a hand gripping tight. Because it doesn't trust, it has to control everything. Humility is a hand held open. Gripping hurts after a while. The open hand can finally rest. And that rest is not defeat. It is freedom. And here's where this ancient psalm connects with something deeply Christian. Do you remember what Jesus said in Matthew 11? He said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And then think of Jesus himself, the Son of God, who had every right to exercise himself in the greatest of matters, and he kept retreating. He would slip away from the crowds. He would rise before dawn to pray alone. Luke 5:16 tells us Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. If the Son of God needed to retreat from the noise, so do we. Remember, this is a psalm of ascents. The people of Israel sang this psalm among other psalms of ascents every time they would go to a festival that they were commanded to attend 3 times a year. We read about in Deuteronomy 16:16. You remember the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles. It was mandatory. And think about what that required. Imagine you are a farmer in ancient Israel. Crops in the field, livestock to protect, and God says 3 times a year, drop everything, take all your family, walk away from the farm, and come to Jerusalem. That is a massive act of trust. The whole structure of it says, God, I believe you will take care of what I leave behind. And this retreat, renew, recommit is not a modern spiritual technique. Again and again in Scripture, at decisive moments, God takes people out of the noise of ordinary life, meets them in a place of renewal, and sends them back, changed and recommitted. Just think of Abraham's journey. Think of Israel in the wilderness. John the Baptist preaching and baptizing at the Jordan River. Jesus drawing the 12 disciples away. Then the disciples waiting in the upper room. And Paul on the road to Damascus, just to name a few. And we today still live in that same rhythm. We retreat, God renews us, and we recommit. This is a biblical pattern of transformation. Now, something I'd like you to hear clearly. Retreat is a posture of the mind, not necessarily a location on a map. Yeah, you can book a cabin, you can attend a conference, and those retreats can be very powerful. Attending a church service or a Bible study can also be a powerful retreat. But you can also have retreats as focused times in your daily life. Before you check your phone in the morning, think of verse 1. My heart is not proud. I do not concern myself with things too wonderful for me. That is a retreat. Stuck in traffic on your commute, turn off the radio, breathe, pray one sentence. God, these great matters are yours today, not mine. That is a retreat. Waking up 20 minutes earlier to sit with God before the noise begins, that is a retreat. Or a weekly Sabbath, a day when you stop producing, stop striving, stop performing in order to focus on prayer and on God's word, that is also a retreat. A retreat is anything you deliberately and intentionally do to step out of the pressure of your everyday system for a focused time with God in order to remember who you are and whose you are. Here's a simple question to carry with you this week. Am I trying to exercise myself in things too high for me right now? Where am I trying to play God? And if you identify one thing like that, just lay it down. It could be one worry, one situation, one person, and move it deliberately from the clenched fist to the open hand. That's the retreat. That's the humble heart saying, God, this one is yours. It's too wonderful for me. And this brings us to verse 2. Let's read it. But I have calmed and quieted myself. In Hebrew and in many other translations it says, I have calmed and quieted my soul. I am like a weaned child with its mother. A weaned child, дитина, яку відлучили від грудей. I am like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content. Notice that word but. It's a turning point, a pivot. It says, I was one thing, striving, proud, chasing great matters, but now I have chosen something different. I have calmed and quieted my soul. And that's active action here. David didn't just wait for peace to fall on him like rain. He applied real effort to his own quieting. He chose it. And then comes this image, a weaned child with its mother. Now, we have to understand this carefully, because a weaned child is not an infant. An infant is noisy, demanding, urgent, crying, always reaching for the breast. A weaned child is older. The weaning process is complete. That child has learned, sometimes through tears and frustration, that the mother's presence is enough. The food is coming at the right time. The child doesn't need to be fed by the mother right now to be content with the mother. The child rests in the relationship, not in what the relationship is currently producing. This image is extremely daring, but before we get into the result of it, we need to stay in the process for a moment. Because if we skip the pain too quickly, we do the psalm a disservice and we do one another a disservice. So David is implying here, I used to be like an infant with God. I was always demanding, always asking, why haven't you fixed this yet? Why haven't you given me what I need? My faith was transactional. I'll trust you if you deliver. I'll be content if things go my way. The process of weaning is not gentle. Have you ever been in a house with a child being weaned? The infant does not understand what's happening. All they know is that the comfort they have always known has been taken away. They scream, they cry, they feel in that moment that they are utterly abandoned. They think the one who loves me the most has turned against me. And I wonder if some of you know exactly what that feels like spiritually. You have prayed the same prayer for years and heard nothing. You have trusted God with something precious and watched it fall apart anyway. You have cried out, God, where are you? and felt only silence. You have felt the deafening quiet of heaven when you needed an answer the most. If that is you, I want you to know that is not failure, that is winning. And winning always feels like rejection, even when it's actually preparation. Because what the winning process produces is not just peace, but a mature faith, a trust that has been tested and has held, a trust that doesn't depend on getting the answer you demanded, a trust that has learned to rest in the giver, not just in the gift. That is the weaned child. That is what God is growing in you. And think of the New Testament again. Think of Paul, a man who had every reason to be anxious. He wrote from prison, he'd been beaten, shipwrecked, abandoned, and yet he wrote in Philippians 4, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. He learned. It's a process. Paul didn't arrive at contentment in some mysterious way. He was weaned into it through hardship and grace and the nearness of God. And then, talking about spiritual life, he adds those wonderful words. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Not I can do all things because my circumstances are good, but because Christ is near. And Jesus Christ himself, on the night before the cross, prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, my Father, if this is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. That is a weaned heart. He brought his honest request, and then he rested in the Father's hands. The relationship was enough, even in the darkest night. And 3 days later, resurrection. Joy breaking through the darkest moment in history. Letting go of you cannot control never feels peaceful at first. It feels like loss. But I want you to hear this, because it's not my words, it is what this psalm teaches us. The weaned child is not a rejected child. The weaned child is still on the mother's lap, still held, still loved. The closeness hasn't changed, only the demand has been quieted. And what takes the place of the demand? Something better, something deeper. It's peace. And underneath the peace, a quiet joy that the world cannot take away. The renewal God offers you is this. You can stop performing for Him. You can simply be with Him. Somebody says, like a human being, not a human doing. Resting against the chest of a Father who is not going anywhere and who actually delights in you. A practical way to practice this, when you pray this week, try finishing with a moment of silence. Not asking, not listing, not striving, just resting in God. Sit with open hands, not clenched fists. Let the sediment of your soul settle, and let your posture say, Father, I trust you. You are enough. And here's a thought to close this section. To the weaned child, the mother is his comfort, though she has denied him comfort. To the weaned child, the mother is his comfort, though she has denied him comfort. And that's the paradox of mature faith. God may not have given you what you wanted, but if you can be in His presence and say, He is my comfort, and that is enough for me, then you become what Psalm 131 calls the quiet soul. Retreating from the busy, scary world, from things that are not yours to handle, and simply focusing on God, spending time in prayer and in His Word, brings us into deeper trust. It brings us into renewal. And renewal, when it's real, it always produces a recommitment. And that recommitment is often on a higher level than we used to be. And this takes us to verse 3. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. Did you notice the shift? Verses 1 and 2 are deeply personal. We read, my heart, my eyes, I have calmed myself. It's all first person, all internal journey, a private discipline. But then suddenly verse 3 turns outward, one level higher. Now it's Israel. Now it's not I, but we. And notice why David turns outward. He doesn't turn outward because it's now his duty. He turns outward because a quiet soul cannot stay quiet alone. When you genuinely calm yourself before God, something happens. You begin to change the temperature of the room around you. Your internal volume, like the level of peace or panic inside you, it sets the tone for everyone near you. David has found stillness, and now that stillness is spilling over. Having found the quiet himself, he turns and says, you too, come this way, put your hope in the Lord. There is something joyful in that, something joyful that he cannot keep to himself. And that word hope in this verse, I would like to dwell on it a little bit. In English, the word hope is a gentle word, like, I hope it warms up soon. I hope the rain they're forecasting holds off so we can get the corn harvested, farmers at Ridge would say. You know, like in English it means something like, I really want it, but I am not completely sure it will happen. It sounds like wishing. But the Hebrew word for hope used here is the word yachal, and it is much, much stronger. It actually means to stand firm in trust, to wait with patient, resilient expectation. This kind of hope is very close to faith and trust. It is an anchor, not a wish. It is like, Ukrainians will probably understand it very well. It's like waiting at the bus stop because you know that the bus is coming. It's confidence in God's faithfulness. David is modeling something profoundly important in this final verse. He did not retreat and remain retreated. He did not experience renewal and keep its benefits to himself. He recommitted to God and to his people. The man who has found peace becomes a peacemaker. The woman who has learned contentment becomes an anchor for those around her still caught in the rapids. The person who has been weaned becomes a guide for those still crying out for milk. And notice what the hope is fixed on. Not hope that things will improve. Not that life will get easier or the economy will recover. It says, hope in the Lord. When all the noise of pressure and ambition has been quieted, what remains is God himself, with his radically covenant faithfulness expressed in his covenant name Yahweh that David is using in this psalm. And David says, that is enough, both now and forevermore. And in the New Testament, this hope has a name. This name is Jesus. In Romans 15, Paul writes, Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will spring up, one who will arise to rule over the nations. In him the Gentiles will hope. The hope of Psalm 131 finds its fullness in the resurrection. Because Jesus was raised, we have reason to hope, and not just for this life, but forever. For those of you who are 60, 70, or 80 years old, the church needs you. Not just it needs you to retreat and renew for your own sake, it needs you to recommit, but not as an obligation, as an overflow. Let me show you what I mean. Picture a bus stop again. There is a young man pacing, checking his phone every 30 seconds, looking down the road, getting more agitated with every minute that passes. And then there is an older man, sitting, still, at peace, not checking his phone, not pacing, just waiting. This older man didn't need to preach a sermon. He didn't need to hand out a pamphlet. His posture proved that the bus was coming. That is what your faith does when it has been weaned into quiet trust. It becomes contagious, not because you speak, but because you sit. You've lived long enough to know what exactly holds. You've been through the recession and the losses and the diagnosis and the grief. And if you are still here, still trusting, still hoping in the Lord, that itself is a powerful sermon. That kind of faith is contagious. People can see it on your face. The recommitment also looks like this: staying connected to community, staying in the church, not giving up gathering together, because the quiet heart is tested the moment it steps back into the world. The noise returns, the fertile soil we've tilled begins to harden again. We need each other. We need each other to remind ourselves where our hope is anchored. So we have looked at what Psalm 131 teaches us. Let's bring it all together. We started this morning by talking about noise. The noise that meets us before we even sit up in bed. This noise keeps us striving, grasping, worrying, performing. And in 3 small verses, we found a path out of that noise and into the freedom of a quiet, restful soul. Retreat, renew, recommit. Retreat. Like David, like Jesus himself, we choose to step back from the great matters that belong only to God. We loosen our grip. We come down from the ladder of pride. We say, "This is too wonderful for me, Lord. It's yours." We create space, even small space, even 20 quiet minutes before the world wakes up, to remember who we are and whose we are. It was retreat. Now renew. We allow God to wean us from a demanding transactional faith into a mature, resting trust. We move from the crying infant who needs to be fed every moment to the content child who simply rests in the Father's arms. We spend time with God in prayer and in His Word. We finish our prayers with silence. We practice holding open hands instead of clenched fists. We say with Paul, "I have learned to be content." And we trust that the learning, however painful, is worth it, because the joy on the other side is real. So it was retreat, renew, and now recommit. We return to our lives, to our families, to our communities, to our churches, not as the same noise-driven, fear-driven person who left, but as one who carries the quiet inside. We let that peace spill over. We become the steady person in the room. We turn to those around us and say, "Put your hope in the Lord." Not in your circumstances, not in your health, not in your savings account, but in the Lord. And we mean it, because we've tasted it. Spurgeon was right. This is a short psalm to read, but a long one to learn. We will spend the rest of our lives learning it. Every day, life will keep the pressure on us. The inner infant will cry again. We will slip back. That's why retreat, renew, and recommit is a cycle, not a finish line. And that is actually good news, because it means every single day is a fresh start. As we leave this place today, remember this: Psalm 131 is a psalm of confidence. King David shows us what it actually means to trust. It's not a passive waiting, but a deep, active surrender. Trust is not simply sitting back and hoping things will work out. It is choosing to let go of what is not ours to carry, so that we can receive what only God can give us. In the midst of noise, pressure, and uncertainty, we are called to quiet ourselves like a child, resting in the lap of a loving mother. Don't wait for life to calm down. It won't. The noise isn't going anywhere, but you can be a different kind of person in the middle of it all. A person whose heart is not proud, whose soul has quieted, whose hope in the Lord is steady and anchor strong, and whose joy runs deep. Joy no amount of noise can drown, both now and forevermore.